Hello guys, and welcome back to the How to Animate YouTube channel. So, if you've been following along with this series, you know that I've got up to a decent timing pass on this, and last video I started polishing first 80 frames. So what I'm going to be doing is continuing on with that approach, so I'm going to mask this off as 80 frames again, and what I'm going to be doing is having a look at this dinosaur stomp and roar, and trying to get a bit more weight into it. And I also want to add a boil layer for the dinosaur that I can use for this roar and possibly later on as well. Cool, alright, so let's get into it. Go over to perspective camera here. I'm going to take a look at the mechanics of this stomp because I need to make sure that I really kind of sell the weight. You see how the foot at the moment is just coming down sort of really slow. It's not quite where I want it to be. We've also got this weird thing where the toes kind of curl into the floor. So we'll start here. Alright, so get rid of that toe movement first of all. I do want a bit of a claw towards the top once the foot reaches the top here, but it just kind of all kicks in a little bit too soon. Okay, so I'm going to basically do that, copy and paste that there to keep his toes flat, and I do want a little bit of a push off here. So what I'm going to do is counter rotate this down so we get a bit of a kick off, and then the end parts of the toes here I'm going to counter rotate back. There's another way of doing this using these controls. So if you've ever looked at feet and wondered, you know, why have we got rolls and, you know, all this stuff in here, this is basically another way of doing it. So what you'd do in that case is you wouldn't rotate the foot. You'd basically keep the rotation flat and you'd use the roll and all this stuff. So there's two ways of doing it. Depending on the movement, I'll use both. This is very simple kick off. I don't need anything too advanced, so I'm just going to use this method here. Okay, so this foot comes up. Now this is a tricky bit because I need to keep the foot moving a little bit. I've also got this foot here sort of repositioning. So what I'm going to do is just check that curve is really smooth first of all, just to keep it moving upwards. You can see here it's like horrible, so what I'm going to do is create a nicer shape for it, and it should instantly look a lot better. You see that? Okay, and this curve here is super important as well. As it comes back down, you see I've already set it to linear here, so you'd think it would look better than this, where it kind of just, yeah, it just kind of slows into the floor still, even though it's on linear. So what we need to do is push this shape a lot more. So the shape we want is this. Now you see as I push this down, you get this horrible thing here. So what we need to do is just simply break the tangent, and that will give me access just to this part of the tangent that I can then push up, and then I'm going to modify that to create a nicer shape. Okay, so if we have a look at this now, we'll just play it at speed. Okay, it's better. Now if I wanted even more snap to this coming down, I can move this across to keep it up in the air a little bit longer. I still want the foot to land before the body comes down. So, okay, I've done that. Now this curve doesn't look great, so I'm going to do that. Okay, that's starting to feel better. Now, you notice how it just kind of looks a little bit rigid, like it comes down, it just kind of stops dead. You know, there's no sort of reverb, there's nothing happening with the toes or the foot itself. So what I'm going to do is add a bit of texture into this to make it feel nice and weighty. Okay, there's a neat little trick when you're doing dinosaurs or anything kind of creature based, and that's to do with the toes splaying out. So what you can do is, at this point I'm just going to angle the foot down a bit. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab these toes here and push them inwards like this towards the middle toe, and then have them kind of aiming downwards a little bit towards the floor like this. Okay, now as they hit the floor, what we're going to do is a splay outwards. Okay, now it requires a little bit of keying into it, so basically what I want is kind of like a duplicate of this. So what I'm going to do is raise this slightly. I don't want this to be an ease frame, so what I don't want to do is raise it up too much and therefore lose that snappiness to the floor. I don't want that, but what I want is just a tiny sort of breakdown that does this basically and pushes the toes into the floor. Okay, we're still going to keep these inwards towards the middle toe. Okay, and we'll counter rotate these toes backwards to stop them clipping. Like so. Okay, I'm just going to use a little bit of translation as well, just to squash them up. Okay, I'm just going to key that so they're kept down there as well. So we go from here to here, and then they splay outwards. Like that. I'm just going to move that over a little bit more. Okay, now what we're going to do is just delay that splay by a little bit. So I'm going to grab these ones here and move that by a frame. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some reverb up into the rest of this leg here. So at this point I'm going to use this roll control here. Actually, I think there might be a better one. I'm pretty sure one of these... That's a good one to use in a second. Okay, this one. Yeah, this is what I want. So, pivoting from this point here. Okay, so we hit here. I'm going to do a bit of a bounce back up. And then a 2-frame settle. Okay, that's a little bit too extreme. Okay, I think I need to go a little bit more extreme with this pose here to make this work, so I'm going to push that down. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to toe roll, no, not toe roll, sorry. I'm going to grab this one here and push it right into the floor on the heel. So rotate that right the way back so it makes more contact, and push that along by a frame. Like that. What I'm going to then do is feed this up, this kind of movement up into this one here. It's a really good control to be using. So what this does is lets you basically move this part of their leg kind of independently. So it's very, very handy for this kind of stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to offset that by a frame, stick a breakdown key here, and then have the back of the leg come down a little bit later. So we get this kind of nice reverb going up the leg, and then I'll push that forward there. And why not give that an offset as well? Okay, I've offset a little bit too much. It looks a little bit disconnected. So what I'm going to do is bring that back by a frame. There we go. That's what I want. I want it to hit and reverb up the leg. There's weight on the leg, but you know, there's a lot of force coming down. So I kind of want to deal with that, you know. Okay, so you get that kind of nice reverb there. Cool. You notice how this foot is feeling nice and weighty, but the rest of them now isn't. So I need to basically kind of do the same thing here. Make sure I get, you know, it all kind of travelling back up the hierarchy as that reverb basically travels up the body. So I go back to this curve here. No, sorry, this curve here. This is our up and down. You see how ugly this is. not good. So I really need to work into this curve a little bit. Okay, so take a look at what the dinosaur's doing. So I've got a little bit of a dip down here to anticipate him turning. He comes up. What I might do, because his weight is, just push that down a little bit so it's a little bit harder for him to get up into the position. And once he's up, he's going to sort of stay there. I'm tempted to actually make that an apex and then put another key here just to stabilise, to keep him up. So we get this kind of nice bouncing ball shape up the top there. Yeah, I think that's going to work better. Okay, so the weight comes down. Foot hits here. So we basically need to overshoot in this direction. So he's a big creature, you've got all this mass coming downwards like this, down, down, down. At the moment he just stops dead. This is not good. All this mass would keep trying to go down like this. Okay, it would then taper off, so you'd get an up and a down. So you taper that, all that inertia has to go somewhere, and it gradually gets tapered off, basically. Okay, now I don't want to go too far. If I start doing this too high, you see where he suddenly looks like he's super light. There's still a lot of downwards, you know, force because he's so heavy. Therefore I don't want him to be bouncing up and down like this. I want it to be pretty tight. Okay, another trick is, because it's a heavier thing, therefore the down position is going to be a little bit longer. Kind of the opposite of a bouncing ball. So a bouncing ball travels up, it's up in the air. You know, it's the opposite of the bouncing ball shape. For kind of heavy things. So you do this kind of shape. Okay, so it's super important to get comfortable with the graph editor and sort of understand what these curves mean, how they all work, and you know, it's a really quick way to play with stuff as well, you know, and get a good feeling of it. Okay, so if we have a look at this from the side, this is how it's currently looking. So you know, there's a bit of weight going on there, but you notice how it's all kind of just moving down as one block. So there's a couple of things I could do here. I'm kind of debating whether to lead with the head or have the head drag. So what I'm talking about there is, I say the primary motion here is this downwards motion. So I've either got the option to have the head lead it, in which case it would kind of curl downwards and then it would come along this arc here and then come forward, or have it drag, so it wouldn't be under tension, it would just be kind of getting dragged along and therefore it would be going that way. So it's kind of that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try very quickly the head leading this action. So what that would look like is something like this. So what I need to do is basically counter rotate this curl and get it as curled up as I can. Now I'm going to be pushing the rig pretty far here, so hopefully I can do this. Luckily I've got 4 controllers to work with, so that does help. So this becomes something a bit more like this. So the head is kind of almost cocked backwards. We kind of compress it all as far as it will go. It might look a little bit goofy from this angle, but I'm thinking like in the camera view it might look a lot better. Okay, so we go from here, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a snapshot of that because that's where I want it to end up, but then this breakdown here is going to be kind of similar. So the head's going to be like this, kind of leading. Okay, leading a little bit more. Actually, I don't want him to roar so soon as well. I want to kind of keep this jaw, anticipating the roar a little bit longer for this kind of move. So he won't actually start roaring until about here. Okay, and break this down a little bit more by just making a breakdown that's very extreme. So it's basically a big change of shape here. Okay, I'm just going to move that up by a frame. That's almost working. Cool. I'm just going to feed it a little bit more into this control here. I'm going to translate it back, which is a bit annoying because it's an FK spline, but I don't care. And then I'm just going to stretch him forward that way. And actually I won't do that just yet. Cool. Alright, so we're going to look at that from the camera view, because that's the only thing that really matters. Let's see if this works. Okay, so obviously the problem I got is he's not actually looking at her anymore, but that's an easy fix. I'm just going to basically select all these, keep the same kind of shape, but then just change it so he's looking at her. Okay, I could go a little bit more extreme, so you don't really notice it in the camera so much, but instead of that head dragging, it's kind of leading, so it's actually snaking. It's almost like it's snaking forward along that arc, along that line of action, and it's kind of leading the action. So the other way to do it would be to have it completely delayed from what the hierarchy is doing. So that would come down. That would kind of come down, and the head would be like lagging behind and sort of maintaining this long shape. Yeah, I think I quite like this. It needs some work, but as a quick test, I think I definitely see potential in it. So what I'm going to do is just kind of push it as far as I can, really, without it looking too crazy. And get away with quite a lot because this camera is front on. I might even try just translating the head forward a little bit there. Another important point is it only really matters what's in the camera view, so you can, you know, do some pretty interesting stuff in perspective to kind of push stuff, but as long as it looks good in the camera view, that's all that really matters. Okay. Yeah, I think that's working quite well. So we play it in the camera view, you see it's all starting to feel really weighty. Cool. So now what I want is I've got a bit of texture here in this raw, but I want to add a boil layer now that I could possibly use elsewhere as well. Okay, and what this does is basically, instead of, if I wanted to do, for example, kind of shakes like this, I don't really want to go in and have to start sort of keying into this here. It's going to be a nightmare. I'm not going to have much control over it. So in similar, if you watch the dragon tutorial, on my channel, you know all about sort of, you know, additive layers, so it's perfect for this kind of stuff, just adding, you know, shake texture on top of your existing animation. Okay, so to create this animation layer, I'm just going to simply select everything on the dinosaur here. This is only the FK spine, mind you, so later on when I switch to IK spine it won't affect that. I'm going to have to do something different for that. Let me just delete this layer here. Okay, and I'm going to add a new animation layer. Call it oil. Cool. Alright, so what I'm going to do is just set a key to start. And then a couple of frames later what I'm going to do is just go in and start nudging everything just a little bit. Okay, so I sped through that because it's not terribly interesting watching me just nudge controllers, but basically what I was doing is just going through and, you know, every 2 frames just giving everything a slight nudge. So mostly just around the face area, the jaw, a little bit of head, you know, a little bit of neck. These kind of controls here are good as well. There's one on the belly. Okay, so we get a little bit of a shake. So what this looks like in the graph editor, something you need to be a little bit careful of. Select your animation layer. Make sure you go back to your 0 key, or your first key. Okay, so do some texture like this, about this many frames. You can do more if you want, but you know, this is probably enough. And then copy and paste this key to the end. Otherwise it won't loop. Because we do want this to loop. So what we'll do is we'll set this to loop forever, both front and back. So if we play this now, it's basically going to be playing that animation on top throughout the entire animation, which isn't really what we want. We only want him doing it on the raw bit. One thing I'm also going to do is just kind of offset and just mess this up a little bit. It's not really a quick way of doing this, but I guess just kind of select a chunk of controls. Okay, and because it's looping forever, you can basically do whatever you want. You can kind of space some bits out if you want, or, you know, shrink them in a little bit, do whatever, but the important thing is just to get a little bit of randomness, just so it kind of, the more random you can get this, the better it's going to look, is basically what I'm trying to say. So just a little bit of kind of retiming and offsetting make a big difference. Let me do the jaw as well. So move that by a frame. There we go. You see we get nice kind of ripples happening as it's roaring. If it's too extreme, then this is what the weight is for. You can say, okay, I like it, but I only want half of it. Okay, and that'll just add a little bit. Cool. And it's also the weight is where you would kind of dial it on and off as well. So I probably don't want it happening at the start here. I only really want it to start kicking in about here, so I'll just dial the weight off to 0 here. Dial the weight onto 1 throughout this whole raw here. And then key it here so it's on 0. And then key it off. This weight is also in the graph editor, so if you ever want to visualize it, it's kind of hard to see what's what here, but go to the graph editor, select the weight, and you'll be able to see the curve that dials it on and off. Alright guys, so this is how we are looking. So we've got a bit of weight going on here. I'm liking the boil. Might tone that down a little bit later, but I'm just going to leave it in there for now. A couple of little things I need to do just to finish the stomp is little arms. There's no keys on those yet, and they're very rigid. And also the hip control, the back one that kind of controls. See, as he stomps down, it all just kind of dies at the back here. So I need to add a bit of something to that, but we're almost there with this part. So what I'm going to do is see what controls we got to work with. I don't think this guy has a shoulder. Okay, these are the shoulder. Okay, I'll start from the top of the hierarchy and work my way down basically. So these two shoulder controls. Let me just switch off controller so you can see it better. Oh, I need to be careful because I'm on the boil layer. Okay, another thing about animation layers is very, very easy just to select it and then be animating away on the layer. Best thing to do, in this case the boil layer isn't going to be touched again for a while, so just lock it. That'll stop you keying it. And I know that I'm on the base layer here. Alright, so let's just add a bit of something to these arms. So I'm just going to do a bit of rotation here, just going to keep them alive. Nothing too fancy. This is where I want a bit of overlap. See, they're not really under tension. So as his weight comes up, they are going to come up a little while later. As he comes down, they're still going to remain up. They're going to do their reversal around about here, so I'm just going to push that along, tuck them back a little bit, just so we get a little bit of bounce on them. Okay, probably don't need to do too much with these arms. I mean, they're just kind of held in position anyway. So I might just add a tiny little bit of overlap in action on the elbows, basically, just to make them feel a little bit more organic. So as he raises up, I'm just going to give them a slight nudge there, slight nudge there. At this point they're already up quite a lot, so I'll just keep them there. Reversal happens here, so I'll just put a little break down here just to keep them up a little bit longer. Little down position, and move it along. Okay, and that's the arms pretty much done. Don't need to worry about the wrists. I don't think they would be doing much. This control here is quite important. So this is FK spline. I spoke about this in the last video as advantages and disadvantages of FK-IK. This would be a point where it would be really nice to have the ability to translate this down. So what I'm going to do is actually I'm going to look in the rig itself and see if I can actually add the translation in. Sometimes that is possible, so give me a second. And no, it's not possible. So I've added the channels back in and they're just completely disabled, so that's a shame, but it was worth a quick look. Some rigs, you know, you can kind of cheat it and have a bit of an FK-IK mesh up at the back there, but it's fine. I'll just make do with what I've got. So let's take a look at what's going on. So I've already got a key here. So as he comes, I kind of want that to be a little bit more down there. The position of that is quite nice. I don't want to push that too far because it will start looking a bit weird, so I'm going to leave that where it is. And the important bit is this: as his hips kind of start driving that foot down, I want them to kind of lead a little bit. Move this along, and then I want a bit of a reverb at the back here, so around about here. Give this a nudge in this direction here, and then back that direction, and then I probably want a little bit of a snap to it. I'm just going to look in the camera so you can kind of see it a bit better. Around about here I want a little bit of a snap in that direction, which then will go up in that tail. You see we've got that nice tail whip there. I kind of want to lead the hips into that a little bit. So it's almost like all the weight has sort of come up through this leg, translated into the hips, kind of rotated, and that's what's forced this tail to come around. That tail is a little bit late, so what I'm going to do is just shift that up a tiny bit. Okay, so it's important when animating, just thinking it all kind of, everything on this rig kind of works together. Nothing's independent, you know, so you need to kind of really think about how it all kind of works as a unit. So that's kind of what I'm after, is the hips kind of wiggle here, and that's what forces the tail to then come back around. Cool. Alright, let's play that. I think might go a bit more extreme with that, but I'm relatively happy with it. Cool. So yeah, I hope you learned something from this video. In the next one, we're going to be moving on. Let's take a look at what we got next. So we got this part where he kind of rears up and then goes for the bite. So yeah, should be a fun bit to do. So yeah, I really hope you're enjoying this content. If you are, please give it a like. And yeah, I will see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching.